3-2 is weird. And today, we're going to talk about it. I think 3-2 is one of those things in TFT that is approached with a level of not mysticism per se, but just it's this unknown quantity a lot of the time, right? What makes it go right? What makes it go wrong? I'm talking particularly about like when you want to roll on 3-2, right? And how to play a 3-2, and more so maybe even when you don't want to roll on 3-2. And I think a lot of spots that feel really hard because 3-2 is such a hard to approach round. And today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, you know, when to roll on 3-2, why to roll on 3-2, how to roll on 3-2, when not to roll on 3-2. And also we're going to talk about why people in general roll on 3-2 a little bit, because I think it's an interesting concept that will hopefully broaden your TFT horizons a little bit and make you just better at the game. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the question of why people roll on 3-2. The first answer you'll hear from most people is that it's a perfect interval, which that is exactly correct, that it is a perfect interval. It's not the only reason, but and I'd say it's even like one of the smaller reasons why people roll on 3-2, but it is certainly a reason, and we can talk about that for a second here. And so a perfect interval, if you aren't sure what that means, is just any time your XP is divisible by 4 very cleanly. So, for example, this is a 3-2 that I played today. I am 8 XP out of 20. Often you'll be either 8 out of 20 or 4 out of 20, depending on how much you leveled on stage 2. You can even be like 12 out of 20 sometimes if you're a real maniac, but oftentimes you'll be, or if you have like a like maybe an augment that affects your XP intervals, but generally speaking, you'll be, you know, some number that's divisible by 4 left out of 20, and that's certainly an aspect of it. I think a large majority of actually why people roll on 3-2 though, level and roll on 3-2, and just generally get stronger on 3-2, right? Because 3-2 is not just about rolling, it's about getting stronger, and that's what pretty much any interval in TFT is, any key interval, right? So you think of the key intervals, you have, you know, like 2-5, you have 3-2, you have 4-1, 4-2, 4-5, 5-1. These intervals where you'll see people either be leveling or spending their money for units. Basically, they'll be using their resources in some way to get their board stronger, right? But you kind of think of the power curve of a game being that, like, you know, you're like this, and then like 3-2 hits, and like, oh, everyone goes up. We can't erase that. I'm going to start down here. You know, 3-2, everyone goes up. 4-1, everyone goes up maybe a lot, depending on the type of lobby and type of meta, which this one is one of those ones where 4-1, you go up a lot. And then, you know, from there, it's like, you can start to understand intervals a little bit more, is not only just, they're not just perfect intervals, right? It's not just there because it's a place where, like, the amount of money you'll be wasting is minimized. It's also just a place where you'll often want to get stronger because everyone's getting stronger, and that's all an interval really is at the end of the day. Is they're pretty manufactured, which is surprising to hear about maybe. But intervals are not super organic in that, you know, it's certainly like they're often placed around these perfect intervals. But the only reason we get strong on 3-2, or like we feel a need to get stronger on 3-2, is because everyone feels a need to get stronger on 3-2, right? Because that's just how people have decided to play TFT, generally speaking. If you look at some old TFT player, and not like the person's old, but like some older footage of TFT back in the day, right? Like, people didn't know when to roll exactly, when to level. Hyper rolling was a thing, right? Like rolling to 0 on like the end of stage 2, or even, I think maybe it was still 3-1 back then. But there were a lot of like weird concepts that kind of sorted themselves out, I would say, and filter themselves into what we have now, which is definitely more optimal TFT. Not you know, I don't think the TFT will ever be fully optimal, but much more optimal TFT, right? And one of the parts of that has been that we've found these like optimal rounds to get stronger, particularly like the perfect interval kind of was the incentive for people to start doing it, and then like once people started doing it, everyone had to start doing it because, you know, that's when you want to get strong. And understanding like that is pretty important in my opinion, and why we're having this whole conversation is the reason why stuff like that is so crucial to understand is that it lets you do things at weird timings as well, right? You'll often see people like level and roll on 3, or maybe not roll, but like level on 3-5 to level 7, for example, right? You might be, oh, they leveled to 3-5 because they had 40 gold left over. Well, that's not really it, right? It's not the same thing here. It's not, they're not just doing this because this is a time where like the money works out. They're doing this because maybe the money works out as well, which is part of the reasoning, but there's something happening in the lobby that made them want to get stronger at that point. And at the end of the day, intervals really are just understanding when you want to be getting stronger and being able to mess with those and kind of break the rules of TFT. is really important for getting a lot better as a player and for really making yourself feel like you have a lot of agency in the game. So yeah, I think the answer is to why people roll on 3-2, why people get stronger on 3-2 in general, is that other people do it. It's the meta, right? It's at the end of the day, like a 3-2 spike, 3-2 spike time rolling to 6, rather pumping to 6 and then rolling potentially, or not rolling, or just getting stronger in general on level 6 at 3-2 is very, very much just a meta thing. And again, learning how to break that meta can really lead to some great rewards for you as a player, and it's something to keep in mind. And hopefully, if you treat things that feel like they're set in stone like that, right? Because I think getting stronger on 3-2 feels like something that is set in stone. You have to do it. It's something that must be done game to game. It's something that like is just part of the game. It's really not. You can choose other times to spike. And again, most of the time that will be correct. But there are times where like maybe you want to level on 3-3 instead. Maybe you want to level on 3-5 instead. Maybe you want to, instead of leveling on 4-1 to level 7, you want to go to 7 on 3-5, which again, that's probably the most common time you see people like break the rules of leveling intervals. But yeah, all it is really an aspect of the meta. So be willing to think about this whole interval stuff as just like another aspect of the meta, and be willing to find ways to kind of like twist the fundamentals, because it feels like a fundamental, but it's really not. Again, right? It's meta. It's not just a fundamental of the game. It's just that understanding this and being able to manipulate it in a way you want to will really, really add some extra agency to your games. And again, even if like 9 times out of 10, or even 10 times out of 10, maybe 19 times out of 20, or 99 times out of 100, you're still rolling and leveling, and then getting. I'm going to say rolling because you shouldn't be rolling a lot on 3-2. We'll get to that, but you'll still be on 3-2. Level 6 on 3-2, like 99 out of 100 games, that's okay. But again, this idea of like, this is something that is man-made, it's manufactured, it's a part of the meta. That idea will lend you a lot to your decision-making process and your thought process, and let you really break free in that 100th game, but also like other points of those other 99 games. Just understanding the game at a deeper level like that should really help level up your decision-making throughout an entire game, even in other aspects, as you start to mess with roll timings and say, okay, well actually I can level to 6 on 3-2, then 7 on 3-3 this game, because there's this guy who's really strong, and if I break his streak, he's bought 4, and then he's like the best person, and a person in the best spot other than me, and if I do that, then there's like things like that you can start asking yourself, and you find some really unique spots that are very rewarding. So yeah, let's move on. Not every opener is created equally in TFT, and that's a big part of deciding when you actually want to roll on 3-2, and when you decide, how much you want your 3-2 to spike you. So what we're gonna look at a little bit here, and just have in the background here as we talk about these concepts, is I think I was talking about this in an earlier video potentially, but these are stage 2 and 3 win rates for different boards, and we'll kind of use these as context hopefully as we go through. But basically, when you're thinking about a 3-2, and I'm not going to say necessarily just rolling, but basically deciding how much you want to spike, right? Because I think the problem with the idea of not all openers being created equally is that just because you have a bad opener and you're loose streaking does not mean you have win-out potential, right? And I think oftentimes you'll see someone like be losing on 3-2, or not on 3-2, sorry, but losing on stage 2 rather. You'll see the people losing on stage 2, and they'll have ciphering. You're like, okay, that guy's in a good spot to win the game. But then maybe you have like a weird spot on stage 2, and you're losing, or you're like win-loss or something, and you don't feel like you're in a good spot to win the game. But you need to do something, right? You need to do something really badly, or you're gonna have a really tough game. And so you're like, okay, well, should I roll on 3-2 this game? And there's you don't know exactly what kind of questions you should be asking yourself to decide this. 3-2 rolls around, you just say, fuck it, I'm just gonna go 8. You level, you sit, you lose a bunch of fights on stage 3, you go 8, you roll, you miss your units, you're dead. You win 8th. Or you win 7th, or maybe you hit your units and you went 4th, or something, right? And so what we're gonna try to do is we're gonna try to talk about how to avoid that kind of game. And so the very first thing with the idea of like rolling on 3-2 is that, again, it's that idea of like all create openers are not created equally, and what 3-2 is it is a way to get back into the game, a way to kind of slingshot your, like, rubber band yourself back into the game. I think the imagery of a rubber band is pretty good for this, because the thing with a rubber band is that you don't just, like, a rubber band doesn't just snap on its own, right? You have to pull it back first, and that's what a 3-2 is all about. It's about setting yourself up properly, which we'll talk about. Set yourself properly to actually be in a spot to spike easily. And you know, effectively, because let's say, actually, let's go back to that other hypothetical for a second. Let's say you get to 3-2, you decide to roll it all down, you roll the 0, you get really strong, you win all of stage 3, then you have no gold, and you fizzle out to a 7th. Right? Because you don't have any room left to spike. You know, you hit your TF2 and your Draven 2 and your yada yada yada, and you won all the entire stage, and you didn't make 10 until 3-5, and then all of a sudden you're dead. And there's this, you know, it makes it feel very daunting, I would say. It's a very daunting part of the game, because there's like so much depth in decision making and so much skill expression, understanding like when you should be rolling and how much you should be rolling, and what you need to be stronger than, etc. That it's super spooky. And it's so easy to go too far in either direction, right? Either to roll too little or roll too much, or to commit too little or commit too much. And so, you know, the big thing is that with that rubber band analogy is that it really does start, like a good 3-2 does not start on 3-2. A good 3-2 starts on stage 2. And set yourself up in a way where you're going to have, again, an easier time spiking on stage 3. And not, you know, basically, if you ever have to roll the 0 on stage 3 to get strong enough, let's say you are playing for, you know you're gonna have to like roll on stage 3, because like you should always, if you're gonna be rolling on 3-2, you should always know you are gonna have to roll on 3-2. You should never be surprised by it, right? And if you do that and you spend a bunch of gold and you don't hit anything that would have made you strong enough, or as strong as you wanted to be, then that's not the game's fault, really. That's your fault, because it means you were too, like, the conditions to get strong were too strict, right? And it means you did one of a few things wrong. And we'll start going through some of those. So first and foremost, the most important thing to making sure that you can spike on 3-2 when you need to is getting the idea in your mind that you're playing for some, you know, like stage 4 or stage 5 comp out of your mind. Because when you decide that it's time, that when you have a really bad opener, and you'll understand when you have a bad opener, right? When you have a bad opener, you have to decide right then and there that, okay, this is going to be a tough game. I need to make sure that I am, rather than saying I'm playing Vex, I'm going to just, you know, play Vex and Prey, or I'm going to play Aphelios and Prey, or whatever, or TF, or, you know, or Elise, or whatever the heck the flavor of the month is. You have to say, okay, well, I'm going to be playing for some kind of spike in stage 3. And so that means that, you know, you still have to keep in mind what you're going to be playing eventually, but, you know, imagine the way you play right now. Let's say you're hard forcing Vex. Or not hard forcing, but let's say you're playing towards Vex, right? So the way you're playing towards Vex, like that, the kind of thought processes you have playing towards Vex, you now have to instead, and that's like your stage 4, right? You have to instead apply that to like a spot where you're playing for your stage 3. So, you know, you're not looking for a blue buff for Vex anymore. Maybe you're looking for a blue buff for like a Morgana. For like a Morgana 2 to help you through stage 3. You're looking for a which maybe will eventually turn into Vex, right? And that's an important part of this, is understanding what it can turn into eventually and what it can grow into. But it's about prioritizing what you have in front of you and what you're going to be having sooner in the game, and then letting that transition naturally into what uses those items later, and making sure that like that does have something that can use the items later, right? Like don't build. I don't know. I mean, the problem is everything has something, so like, you'll find something for what you have, generally speaking. But like generally, like item, as far as like comps that have item conditions, you'll find yourself needing to consider, though, they can consider what the item conditions are and make sure that you do have items that fit into condition for something later on. But again, like, you will almost always be able to fit your items into something as long as you were able to stabilize on stage 3. So the priority becomes not, I want to play for Vex this game, or I want to play for this game, or there were Aphelios, or this 3 cost reroll, or that 4 cost, or that 5 cost, or anything like that. It becomes, I want to play for a stage 3. I want to play for what's going to be a really strong stage 3 board. And so I think stuff like this can be a really good starting point for that, because the question is like, okay, well, how do I know what a really strong stage 3 board is? You can look like at things like this to help at first, right? It's about knowing like what the 2 and 3 costs want in terms of item, or even like some of the really strong 1 costs. Because spoiler alert, there are some really strong 1 costs right now. But it's about understanding like what these units want, what is Bis. Morg holds Vex items, right? But it becomes not what is Bis Vex, but what is Bis Morg. Not what is Bis Aphelios, what is Bis Jin. And so you play for that, right? And that's how you make sure that you can have like a because if you have Bis Jin, it's very similar to the reasoning in stage 4, where if you have like Bis everything, right, like a Vex 1 can be really stable on a Vexotech board. A Jin 1 can be really stable on stage 3 if you just have his best items, which I don't know what his best items are for what it's worth. I don't play a lot of Jin. But I do this. I think this is a good example of this is like the Nefiri tech. If you want to watch that video or have watched that video, where like Nefiri 1 or Nefiri 2, generally even Nefiri 1, if you have the right items, was very, very strong through stage 3, and this was kind of the whole concept behind that line, was this idea of like, okay, well, I'm going to build items for this 2 cost, and it's going to just lead me down a line eventually, but it's going to make me have a really strong stage 3. And sometimes, and this is the case with a lot of reroll boards, 2 cost rerolls in particular, is that the line that it leads you down will just be the units that you're playing around, right? So for example, TF, the last few patches has been very strong. This patch less so, but TF, on stage 3, level 6 was one of the strongest boards in the entire game, and so everyone knew what Bis TF was. It's like, at the time, it was like Rageblade Arcano's Gunblade rather than Double Rageblade. And so people would play towards that, and they'd have a really, really strong stage 3, and their TF game would be really smooth because they won their whole stage 3, right? And so this is really just an extension of that philosophy, even further in the past, right? Like Vayne boards, this set that have existed. You have like Vayne with Double Rageblade GS, like kind of stomping through stage 3, or like Double Rageblade whatever stomping through stage 3 with Jarvan and Senna, and then like it naturally leads itself into just rerolling Vayne. TF naturally lends itself to rerolling TF. A lot of these other ones, like playing around like Veigar potentially, or Morgana, or Kog'Maw, I think is another big one that's like a very strong 2-star 1 cost right now. They don't necessarily lead into rerolling themselves. Morgana now is starting to be rerolled with Bastion stuff, more so for sure, right? But you can apply that same logic to these reroll comps to just progressing into a comp later on, where you look for like a Bis Kog'Maw, which is like you go like Rageblade AD whatever. And then you transition that into something that uses those items later, which is maybe an Aphelios or maybe a Zeri. Or maybe you're playing like 4 Rapid Fire Kog'Maw on stage 3 because you have a bunch of swords and no bows, and so all of a sudden you end up playing around MF, or you end up playing around, I don't know, someone who uses a bunch of swords, Zed or something. It would work, right? Like, as long as you're winning your stage 3, you have a lot of extra room to breathe. And so this is what that whole concept of setting yourself up for a good stage 3, the very first concept is the idea of playing around what you have and playing around what you're going to have sooner, right? So again, like play for, don't build Rageblade on Kog'Maw to get to Aphelios. Build Rageblade on Kog'Maw because it's really good on Kog'Maw. Build Blue Buff on Morg, not because it's going to be really good on Vex, but Blue Buff on Morg because it's really good on Morg. And also you can go Morg 3, so it's, that one's a little less, it's a little more on the nose. I suppose. Build Blue Buff on like Veigar because it's good on Veigar right now, not because it's going to be really good on Vex later. That kind of thinking, when you're particularly when you're playing from behind, because if you're super far ahead, like whatever, man, just say you're playing Vex from 2-1, it's fine. But when you're playing from behind, this kind of thinking is incredibly important for actually finding a way back into the game. Because if you don't find your way back into the game with this, you're going to be coin flipping your game nearly every time, and your games will feel like you have almost zero agency. And this is how you inject agency into your games, right? This is the very first concept. I think we can look at some of these boards too, right? Again, if you want some examples, like you can see like Kog'Maw is broken, Morgana's broken, Nitro is just very, 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 very strong through stage 3. And this is actually a cool one because, this Nitro, you can't stay in Nitro. It's hard, right? Yeah, like this is a board where if you're playing through, you can't stay in Nitro a lot of the time. Like this board is a huge win rate, like a massive, really, really good win rate. But if you stay in it, you're probably gonna lose the game. And so this is a good example of a board where like you play for maybe like Bis Jin in the moment. Maybe it's probably like IE Last Whisper Deathblade or some shit, right? And so you play for Bis Jin, you get a really strong stage 3 up from that, and then you find a way to pivot that into something else, and that's where the skill expression of it comes in. And that's where, like, the power of being able to say, like, okay, well, I have set myself up for a really good stage 3 by building these items for this unit that I have a pair of on my bench. And then you built this board around Jin because you knew it would be really strong on stage 3, even if it didn't necessarily lend itself to getting strong. It's just like being playable later in the game, and then you manage to pivot out of that into some kind of meta variation, whatever, or not. Maybe pivot into something that was cool and woke. Good for you. You may pivot out of that and make something out of it, right? So I think the second concept I want to talk about here is that, you know, we've talked now about the idea of playing not for your stage 4 carry, but playing for your stage 3 carry. I also want to talk about the idea of, yeah, the second aspect of setting up your stage 2, and this is, I guess, another kind of just like a second part of the idea of setting up like a stage 3 carry, is that you want to constantly be leaving yourself room to grow when you're playing around. When you're playing around the like wanting to spike really hard on stage 3, wanting to slingshot your way back into the game. Because, for example, if you just are sitting on like Vi pair all of stage 2, right, and you hit Vi 2 at the end of stage 2, or let's say like you are sitting on like Seraphine pair and you hit Seraphine 2 at the end of stage 2, it's not gonna do a lot through stage 3, right? Neither one of those are, and like they'll be useful, but they're not gonna like win you a ton of fights or anything on stage 3. And so rather than holding that Vi pair or holding that, and this is probably more easily digestible, but the Seraphine pair, hold like, you know, the Braum one, or hold the Rast pair, or, and hey, obviously you'd hold Rast pair or Vi pair. Hold like the Rast one, right? Or like these pieces that if you like once you roll on stage 3, if you already have a Rast, finding a Rast 2 is 10 times easier, right? So make sure that what you're playing around is actually going to be strong enough to spike, and make sure that you're leaving yourself a lot of room to grow, and that you're not, because again, if you're just holding a bunch of 2-star or like 1-cost pairs, expecting to like 2-star all of them and have really good stage 3, you're not. It's just, and again, some of them are broken, like Kog'Maw and Morg are 2 that are very, very strong, but even then they're not going to like win a ton of stage 3 unless you have good stuff around them, including items. So yeah, let's move on to the next section. I actually want to add as well, so one spot where you shouldn't roll on 3-2, generally speaking, is if you're in a good spot for, particularly when there's 3-cost reroll in the meta, and you're in a good spot for one of them, oftentimes you can wait till 3-5 to even just like go 7 on 3-5 and then roll there to stabilize, if you want to stack an extra 3 rounds. I think a good example of this in the current meta is that you can probably do that with Elise Braum. It's a pretty strong, consistent board that like can be strong through stage 4. I think that's one of the key things with that type of like way to stabilize, is that the board has to be able to play the game through stage 4, and like at least 2 Braum 2 can play the game through stage 4. So that's pretty critical, because you won't really hit at least 3 Braum 3 till like, you know, early stage 5 at the earliest, generally speaking. And so if you can like stabilize on 3-5 with like at least 2 Braum 2, win those extra 2 rounds to have a good stage 4, not win it all maybe, but like just, you know, don't be dead. You're just not be dead. That's the kind of thing that you can do. I think you can also do that maybe with like Rengar. I don't know how playable he is. I think he's probably playable right now. I know he's kind of been coming back, so you know, keep your eye out for that one. But like those 3-cost rerolls can be things that are playable at like a 3-5, and would be a spot where like if you have a really good Elise spot, a really good Rengar spot, like maybe, you know, don't look for a 3-2 per se. Look for maybe, you know, continue to make money. Look for a 3-5 stabilization instead, which might be a similar spot to when you'd want a 3-2. And so this is why I add this, is that, you know, it's rare that you're low rolling your stage 2 and you're not going to 3-2, but that would be a spot where like you would want to, you know, look for 3-5 instead. It's definitely a nebulous concept, particularly when you're first approached by it, but I think it's something that becomes pretty applicable the more you think about it and the more you try to apply it. Definitely when you're watching streams, when you're watching your own games back, maybe you're watching your own VODs or something, or even when you're playing your own games, think about like, you know, if you think about applying that logic, the idea of, you know, playing for your stage 3 carry, not your stage 4 carry, you'll find a lot of spots where it changes your decision making, or when you notice that someone is maybe, you know, when someone's rolling on 3-2, they're, you know, prioritizing things in a way maybe you wouldn't have otherwise if you were just stuck in this idea of I need to get to my, you know, this needs to be a Vex game, I just need to figure out how to get there. Because a lot of the time, you just can't, right? You can't load into a low roll game and say I'm going to get to Vex on level 8, because you're just being coin flipping, and it's again it's not a way to express skill. It's not a way to inject agency into the game, and you'll have some really frustrating games. So hopefully this was helpful, and thank you for watching. Bye bye. I should also probably add, if you're high rolling, just don't roll on 3-2. You don't need to. 3-2 is for the low rollers in the world. Don't like roll to keep a streak. Don't do any of that. It's not worth it. I like kind of assumed that was part of, like, it was an assumption I made while recording that. I'm gonna just add this to at the end to say, like, if you're high rolling, just don't roll on 3-2. You don't need to, man. Just go 8. It's fine. It doesn't matter. Go do your thing. Don't get it. Leave us.